collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
This week, a British man hopes his 15-year legal battle will be sorted by the Supreme Court today.
We found out that the developer had actually sold our house to another family to profit more at a higher price.
It's Cervical Cancer Week. What do you know about HPV?
Which causes cervical cancer to women, cancer of the penis to men, vaginal cancer, anal cancer.
The annual economy panel will address outlook and risks in a challenging world.
And we think the decade that starts this year will be a little bit more noisy than the previous one.
And a film about Cypriots in Birmingham premieres in Nicosia.
22 Cypriot women who migrated to Birmingham many years ago, and it describes their journey to Birmingham and their life, what they have been through all these years, especially throughout the Turkish invasion period in 1974.
My first guest has been fighting for 15 years for justice over a dodgy property sale and defamation case. It was back in 2005 that Conor O'Dwyer bought a property in the Famagusta district of Cyprus. He joins us now on the day that his appeal is finally being heard in the Supreme Court. So, Conor, let's go back, if we may, to 2005 and tell us about the house you bought and then what happened next.
Yeah, well, 2005, it's a long time ago now, but my wife and I and our two children decided to move to Cyprus. We bought a house off-plan through a property developer very prominent in the area. And then halfway through the build and halfway through paying for it, we had a falling out with the developer over some changes he made to the development. Some were in breach of contract and some were clear misrepresentations at the point of sale.
So then you did what?
So despite the changes he made to the house and to the development, we continued with keeping up our payments, but then started to also share our experience online, and that he clearly wasn't happy with it, and he assaulted me within the first week.
Let's get this straight. You were still paying for the house even though you didn't like the changes that had been made, and he assaulted you while you were still paying for the house? Or had you by then changed your mind about buying it?
No, we were at another point of a stage payment, and he started to refuse that payment, and then we forced that payment on him via a court server. He still refused that. But then he said, we will, in writing, he said, we will never ever deliver to you your house, and we will keep all the money paid. That's in writing.
So you did what next? You presumably were living in England at the time and coming over to Cyprus to see how your property was developing, I take it.
Yeah, well, we thought this is crazy. This is absolute madness. You cannot... our contract was deposited in the land registry for specific performance. That house, that plot, was ours. You cannot take somebody's money and unilaterally cancel a contract. We thought this would be over in months. This is just so unusual. And then to assault us, and for that to be caught on camera, we thought, well, this isn't going to last long. But what I did, out of good faith, is I took down all my websites. My one website, which was a blog of how we were moving over here. So I took down that website. It was only up for about 5 or 6 days before the assault. And we replaced it with a statement, just saying, without naming the company, what had happened, and that we hope they're going to see sense and return our money.
But they didn't. And did you take them to court over the assault?
Yeah, a criminal case was started over the assault. Unfortunately, the lawyer who latched on to the company who was representing us almost on the conveyancing started to represent us in the assault. Unfortunately for us, that lawyer then went on to represent Carianus in the same case. It's a very unusual situation, but I've documented this on my website throughout. At that stage then, we have a lawyer who represented both me and represented Carianus in the same case, and that's coming out today in the Supreme Court.
So the lawyer was trying to represent both of you, and they were cleared of the assault, is that right?
Yeah, it was quite an easy way that they got off with the criminal assault. Quite simply, we were not called to court. So despite my lawyer giving clear intentions that I'm going to come to court, and the Attorney General, the police had the video of the assault, a very underhanded trick was done by the local prosecutors in Paralimni. I wasn't called, and in my absence, the case was thrown out. A few years later, in the civil case, they were found liable for the assault, and they paid just minimal damages for that. But during that time, the biggest crime happened, and that was that we found out that the developer had actually sold our house to another family to profit more at a higher price. So,
how was that possible if the paperwork was already lodged with the land registry?
Yeah, it shouldn't be possible. It's a criminal offence under Section 303A of the Penal Code. To sell a house belonging to another is a crime. At the time...
Can I just ask you, you hadn't paid in full at this point for the house, had you? So could it be that it was not considered yet to be yours?
Correct. We had not paid in full. We had paid half the value of the house as it was halfway through construction. But from the moment your contract is deposited in the land registry, you become the beneficial owner of that house. It's pretty much the same as thousands, hundreds of thousands of us on the island here. Before you get your title deeds, it's only that contract in the land registry that secures your right to the property.
Okay, so we're at that stage, and then you were assaulted again, I think.
Yeah, only 3 months after they get in away with the first assault. Then in, I think it was January 2008, so happy anniversary, 12 years this month, I went to the house to take photos for the civil case. There was many breaches of the contract, many lies they had told us, and one of them, for instance, was that we were to buy a detached house. And I specifically went there to take a photo to show that, in fact, they had built a linked detached house. A clear breach of contract. On leaving the house, the unlawful occupant at that time, she phoned the developer, and in the centre of Frenos, in the centre of the village, my car was rammed, I was dragged out, and father and son developer and an employee seriously assaulted me and put me in hospital for 6 days.
What does the person who bought the house, and I presume is still living there, think and say about this? Do they have any regrets or doubts about the legality of the property they own?
Well, it was only through saying my story online that I actually even found out that my house was sold to somebody else. So it's only through sharing my experience that I was contacted from an expat forum to say, "Oh, Connor, somebody is living in your house and they're not renting, but in fact she's bought it." So we wrote her a very nice letter and explained that we're actually in the land registry and that house, that plot is ours, and suggest that she seeks legal advice. Now, when I bought the house, I used an independent lawyer who had never dealt with this developer before. Unfortunately for us, she used the same lawyer as the developer. And
which happens quite a lot out here, I think. We won't go into that.
Oh, of course.
But she presumably doesn't have the requisite papers in the land registry, because they can't accept two papers on the same property, surely.
Correct. And for many years, they were fooling the authorities, saying that she hasn't actually bought it. She's just renting there. And this prevented the authorities here, the police, the Attorney General, from taking criminal proceedings against the developer. So what we did is we took out a very expensive private criminal prosecution against the crime, again, which is section 303 of the Penal Code, you know, that you cannot sell the same house twice. And that went all the way to the Supreme Court, and unfortunately for us, the Supreme Court said, well, you're going to have to go to the civil courts first and show Mr. O'Dwyer that you did not breach your contract. And as we know from where we are today, this civil case has been going on for 14 years.
So let's look to today, the Supreme Court. I think that I'm right in saying you're asking for the damages that weren't paid in full when you won the case, was it in 2012? Correct. And you're also, I think, trying to make a point about free speech and the fact that in such a case as this, you should be allowed to complain, make the facts known, speak out about it.
Absolutely. The case that's at appeal today is quite unusual. It's a 2-for-1. One half of it is, did Conor O'Dwyer breach his contract? And in that, it was found, no, I didn't breach my contract. I did keep up stage payments. And therefore, the case against me is false. It's a lie.
But you're the appellant today, so what are you actually asking for?
We're asking for damages in that. So for winning that, we didn't get a single legal fee, a flight fee, a rent. I've been renting now for 14 years. We got nothing for that. But the judge agreed that the case against me was a lie, was fake, was false. I didn't breach my contract. But then, 2 paragraphs later, in the verdict, he says, you cannot call this builder a lying builder. And he fined me a national record fine for defamation, €60,000 plus interest.
Which is most unusual, I think. I've spoken to lawyers, and usually defamation is almost a nominal fee.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So are you asking for that money back?
Oh, absolutely. But there's many unusual things about this case, and one of the most unusual is that this verdict wasn't even published on the CY Law database. So sat before you is a national record fine for defamation, and nobody has ever been told what really happened in court.
Well, it'll hopefully all be sorted out finally today at the Supreme Court in Nicosia. We've been talking to Conor O'Dwyer, who's been really living a hell, I think we could say, for the last 15 years for closure on this very long-running case.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
It's Cervical Cancer Week, and we're joined on the programme this week by somebody from the Cyprus Association of Cancer Patients and Friends. She's in charge of their marketing. Her name is Georgia Orfanou. So tell us about Cervical Cancer Week and what's going to be happening.
This week and the rest of February, actually, the whole month February, we have actions focusing on enlightenment of the public, men and women actually, because as you know, cervical cancer is caused by the HPV, the human papilloma virus, which causes cervical cancer to women, cancer of the penis to men, vaginal cancer, anal cancer, as well as mouth and throat and head, and it's caused by this sexually transmitted virus, which can be prevented if men and women are vaccinated. There's a vaccination for these.
But they need to be vaccinated when they're quite young, I think.
Yes, they should be prior to being sexually active, actually, from 9 to 14 years old.
And is that, since it was introduced in Cyprus, being rolled out across the population, or is it still an elective thing that parents say yes or no?
It's still actually an elective thing, to be frank, but in 2016 we managed to convince the Ministry of Health to start a sort of program vaccinating for free the girls ages 13 and 14 years old. And now our aim is to extend the program to cover the boys as well.
And you said that you've got events going on throughout February. What sort of events, and how effective are weeks like this at making people aware of the measures they should be taking? I mean, older people, for example, they didn't have the vaccine. I don't suppose there's much point in them having it now, but there are other things they can do.
Men can be vaccinated until the age of 28, and women may be vaccinated until the age of 45 or 48. But of course, this depends on the lifestyle as well. This week, and this campaign, as you said, is an awareness campaign. It focuses on informing people about the symptoms of cervical cancer, the measures we can take, which is the pap test and the vaccination to prevent and to early detect.
And what are the symptoms? I mean, what should people be looking out for or think about going to their doctor about that they could recognise as being possibly an indication?
There are a few symptoms. Women should be extremely careful about unusual vaginal secretions or bleeding, which is outside their menstrual cycle.
Okay, and anything with pain or anything like that?
And pain as well. If the pain persists, of course, they should talk with their doctor. That's why we're going to have presentations on the media and in various locations, in companies, organizations, communities, anywhere in Cyprus.
And presumably on the PASICAF website you've got this information, have you? Can people access this?
Of course.
So that they can go there and find out what they should be looking out for?
Thank you for mentioning this. On the website, on the Facebook, on our social media. There's going to be a social media campaign as well, a TV campaign, radio, on the press. We have leaflets, and we're going to give for free, once again, to boys the vaccines.
And that is Yuria Orfanou from PASICAF, the Cyprus Association of Cancer Patients and Friends, talking about Cervical Cancer Week.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
One of the oldest professional societies in Cyprus is the Cyprus Economic Society, formed back in 1967. And it holds events throughout the year, but it does have an annual economy panel, which is part of its remit to disseminate, I think might be the right word, economic knowledge, shall we say, among Cypriots and anybody else living on the island who may be interested in economics. But it doesn't mean to say that you have to be an expert. In fact, I think the idea probably is that if you aren't an expert, then you should join their annual economy panel, because it's a chance for you to catch up on what's going on in the world. And from the Society, we're joined by Yannis Dirkidis, who's going to tell us all about this year's panel, Outlook and Risks in a Challenging World. Yanni, why did you choose that particular topic? Because I guess for the last several years we've had a lot of different risks and a lot of different outlooks.
Okay. All right, we have an event of this magnitude once a year, between January, when it's the start of the year. Now, this time we're extending it to cover global issues. And the reason is that we anticipate and we think that globally, the global economy is changing in some sense in its direction. We don't anticipate a recession, to be honest, but the thing is that if you slow down on a more long-term horizon as a slowdown, that has implications for countries and economies and has implications for societal cohesion, for reactions, interests, and we think the decade that starts this year will be a little bit more noisy than the previous one.
It's probably, is it true to say that with the way global business works these days, that a little hiccup in one part of the world can reverberate around many other areas, and Cyprus, being a smallish economy, is particularly vulnerable sometimes?
Absolutely. We're vulnerable in many ways. We are vulnerable because we are a small economy, and that makes us more high risk in these terms, but also because we are an open economy, and a very open one. We have a bigger export sector than Germany. Right? It's a bigger share of our GDP than in most other economies. So change in our environment, be it here or in Europe or in the global setting, eventually comes through and has an impact on us.
Now, let's talk about the speakers that you've got, and we should say that this event is coming up next Tuesday, the 28th of January. And Mikis Hadjimikhail, who is a senior advisor to the Bank of Cyprus board chairman, and I think he's also worked at the International Monetary Fund, is going to talk exactly about the global economic and financial outlook. Tell us a bit about him.
Okay, Mikis has been a long-standing economist. He worked in the IMF, as an official of the IMF for a long time, and he headed the International Institute of Finance. He's at the Bank of Cyprus since 2013, when Mr. Ackerman joined as the chairman board, and he carries on advising the new chairman of the bank. So Mikis is an economist who is very well exposed and experienced in global economics, and very much understands the implications of global developments on local economies. He is going to confine himself to analyzing the global setting and the outlook, medium term, and for 2020, and highlights the risks that he sees.
Right, and that will bring us on to the panel, which I think is about the Cyprus economy outlook and the challenges it faces.
Yes. Now, our panel locally is now 3 economists who are all working in their institutions on the local economy, and they do forecasting and they follow developments, and they are very well read and studied on the local economy. It's George Panteli, who is now the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Finance. Is George Kyriakou, who is heading the research division of the Central Bank, and George Sirigas, who was previously at Central Bank. He is now advisor at the Center of Economic Research of the University of Cyprus. So the panel will take on the issue of where are we headed in the current year, but beyond it, how things should unfold, the challenges we're now facing, and how we're transitioning for a strong recovery to something which may be a slower growth in the making for the next few years.
Let's talk now about the audience that attends these sorts of events. I'm sure, yes, it's a lot of business people, a lot of people concerned with economic problems and so on and so forth. But I think I was right in saying that you actually welcome the general public as well, who may be not as versed in these issues. And it might be a good idea if they were, actually. Wouldn't it be better all round if more men in the street and women in the street actually understood what issues are at stake?
Okay. Let me say that at the start that society has as a mission to inform public debate and to promote the study of economics at the same time and influence policy making. So within our mission and objectives, the public is welcome. We don't think that it's everything for experts. The experts sometimes can be a tyrannical issue, right? But if you cannot reach the audience of a wide perspective, I don't think we achieve much. We believe that the discussions we are holding, they are open to people, and they are most welcome to join and attend and take part and ask questions. And the idea is this, to be able to interact with the panel. So we allow quite some time for discussion after the presentations for this purpose.
And I imagine that in the past you may have been somewhat surprised that the view of the man in the street is obviously different from that of the experts who study everything, and it's sometimes difficult when you are an expert to see things from that rather less informed point of view, isn't it?
Well, let me say this. Sometimes the less informed is more informed in the following way. experts, they know too much, but for a narrow area. And so you bring a panel of them, 3 or 4, to put together a story that goes into different directions. The man on the street can know a little bit of many things, so the reception of ideas and propositions and suggestions are received differently. And I think that's very interesting to see how people understand.
So it's all happening, as we said, on Tuesday the 28th. I think you like people to register. Must they register, or can they just turn up?
We ask them to send us an email that they will attend, so as for us to know how many will be attending and to organize the setup, the room and the facilities the best way possible. The email is it's my email. It's Ioannis.Tirkidis, Tirkides, @bankofcyprus.com.
There you go. If you'd like to find out more about the outlook and risks in a challenging world, which is the topic for the annual economy panel being organised this year by the Cyprus Economic Society, then email ioannis.tirkidis@bankofcyprus.com. On Sunday, January the 26th at 6 in the evening at the Pantheon Cinema in Nicosia, there's the premiere in Cyprus of a film about Cyprus. The evening's going to be emceed by my next guest. He is Evgenios Kyriakou, and he joins us now to tell us all about Queens of Amathus. So tell us, Evgenios, what the film is about, because it's a documentary, actually, isn't it?
Yes, it's a documentary. It's about the journey of 22 Cypriot women who migrated to Birmingham many years ago, and it describes their journey to Birmingham and their life, what they have been through all these years, especially throughout the Turkish invasion period in 1974.
So it's what, small interviews with these people, and I think mostly women?
Only women. That's why it's called Queens of Amathus. Yes, small interviews. It's very interesting stories. It's very touching, and the purpose also is to help the Lakis Greek Kitchen charity organization to raise some funds to help people in need.
Oh, tell us more about that.
Yeah, actually, I was one of the patients that was sent in 2013 from Cyprus to Birmingham to receive a liver transplant. And Panikos Panagiotou, the founder of Lakis Greek Kitchen, created this Greek-style taverna in order to assist us financially, because it was very difficult for us to be there for years waiting for a liver transplant. And he did it in the memory of his father, Lakis. His father died in 2012 from lung cancer. And as believed in the Greek Orthodox religion, if your children do good deeds, then your afterlife is better. So that was the whole purpose that it was built at this Lakis Greek Kitchen charity organization. And as part of the events that they are organizing was this documentary now about the...
Okay, but he runs a taverna.
Yes,
is he a filmmaker? How did he go about doing the film? Did he film it himself, or he wrote it and got people to film it? How did it work out?
Actually, he's the writer, the producer, and the director. I don't know, to be honest, how he got the idea to do that. He's mainly running the taverna, but as part of, his way and effort to help more, he thought to make this documentary.
Right, there is a big Cypriot population, I think, in Birmingham, isn't there?
Yes, indeed, there are.
And how did the women who went there to escape the Turkish invasion feel about how they were received? Were they received well? And this is particularly, I think, interesting in the era that we're living in now, when here in Cyprus we have so many refugees coming from much closer countries, and they don't always get a very warm welcome. Were the Cypriots in Birmingham welcomed by the local people?
I believe they were, yes, although I wasn't there myself. I don't know the whole story about these things, but I believe...
So we'll assume that some of that is going to be discussed in the film, because we're talking about refugees themselves sharing their experiences.
Exactly, yes. They built their homes there, and then they grew up there, children, future children there. So it's UK is like the second country now.
And they, of course, like Panicos, set up businesses as well, I suppose.
Yes,
so
yes.
what sort of women? Are they from all walks of life?
Yes, they're women of
Different ages?
different ages and housewives. Some of them were educated and working before migrating to Birmingham. All
Now,
sorts of
I
women.
think that Panicos has uploaded to YouTube various things that happened at the Birmingham Film Festival, where The Queens of Amathus was recently shown, and it was the runner-up, I think, wasn't it, in the Best International Film category?
Yes, he was the runner-up among 792 other documentaries, which was...
So that's quite some recognition.
Yes, exactly. It is.
After this Pantheon premiere, is it going to circulate around the island, or is it just a one-off showing?
It's not a one-off showing. It's going to be filmed 2 or 3 more times.
And do we know when?
Not yet, to be honest.
So if you want
But
to
it's coming
catch the Queens of Amathus, then it's probably a good idea to make sure you get down to the Pantheon Cinema in Nicosia on January the 26th. The screening starts at 6 in the evening, and that's a documentary that was first premiered in Birmingham in November last year and received a fantastic response. Your host for the evening at the Pantheon will be the gentleman we've just been talking to, Evgenios Kyriakou. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.